12,000 years ago, before the first city, before the first farm, before the wheel, before writing, before metal, before pottery, someone built a temple on a hill in southeastern Turkey. Then, after 15 centuries of use, they buried it. The whole thing. On purpose, most archaeologists believe, filled in, sealed, and hidden like a secret. It stayed hidden for 10,000 years. This is Göbekli Tepe, and this single hill broke the story we used to tell about how civilization began. Over the next 14 minutes, I'll show you why. And I'll show you the part almost nobody talks about. 90% of it is still down there. Here's the almost unbelievable part. We found it and walked away. In 1963, surveyors examined this hill, a gentle rounded rise the locals called Göbekli Tepe, Potbelly Hill. They noted some broken limestone slabs, decided it was probably a medieval cemetery, and left. The greatest archaeological site on Earth spent 3 more decades as a wheat field. Farmers plowed around the stone tops that kept surfacing. Some slabs they simply hauled away. The man who looked twice was a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt. In 1994, he was searching the region for Stone Age sites, and he'd read that old survey note. When he climbed the hill, he saw what everyone else had missed. Those grave slabs weren't medieval. The flint tools carpeting the surface were thousands of years older than anything medieval. And the hill itself wasn't natural. It was layers, man-made layers. Schmidt later said he understood within the first minute that he had 2 choices: walk away and tell no one, or spend the rest of his life here. He chose the hill, and when his team began to dig, the ground gave up something impossible. Enormous T-shaped pillars of limestone, some over 5 meters tall, weighing up to 10 tons and more, arranged in great circles, carved with animals, and dated again and again to around 9,600 BC. To put that in perspective, this architecture is older than Stonehenge by 6,000 years, older than the pyramids by 7,000. When these pillars went up, the last ice age had barely ended, and that date creates a problem. A wonderful problem. Because according to everything we thought we knew, the people alive in 9,600 BC could not have built this. They were hunter-gatherers, small mobile bands following game and wild harvests. No farms, no villages worth the name, no wheel, no metal tools, no beasts of burden, not even pottery. And yet, look at the engineering bill. Each great pillar was quarried from the bedrock nearby, with stone tools, some weighing as much as a loaded truck. One unfinished giant still lies in the quarry, attached to the rock, nearly 7 meters, an estimated 50 tons, showing us exactly how they worked. These monsters were then moved hundreds of meters and raised upright by muscle, rope, timber, and coordination. Experiments suggest crews of hundreds working together. Stop and think about what that means. Someone had to feed hundreds of workers for weeks on a hilltop, by the way, with no water source. The builder's answer is still carved into the rock. Cisterns, rainwater tanks cut into the bedrock, holding thousands of liters. Someone had to plan, direct, resolve disputes, keep the vision alive across seasons, maybe across generations. Hunter-gatherers were supposed to be too busy surviving for any of this. Göbekli Tepe says, "You underestimated us, and that's the revolution." The old story said, first farming, then villages, then, with food surpluses, temples and gods. Gobekli Tepe flips the sequence. Here, the temple comes first, which raises a question that archaeologists are still fighting about. Did civilization begin because people wanted to worship together? So what did they build exactly? Let's read the stones, because they are covered in messages we can't quite hear. Start with the pillars themselves. They're T-shaped, and for a long time, people assumed that was just structure. Then the details emerged. On the sides of many pillars, carved in low relief, arms, bent at the elbow, running down the shaft, with long fingers meeting over what would be a belt. Some pillars even wear carved belts and fox pelt loincloths. These aren't columns, they're bodies, stylized abstract beings, with the crossbar of the T as a head. A head with no face. Who are they? Ancestors? Gods? Spirits watching over the gatherings? The builders knew. We don't. Around these silent giants runs a zoo in stone. Foxes bearing teeth, boars, snakes rippling in packs, cranes, scorpions, spiders, vultures with spread wings. Almost all of them male, almost all of them aggressive. This is not gentle pastoral art. It bristles, and there's a pattern hiding in the menagerie. Different enclosures favor different animals. In one great circle, snakes dominate pillar after pillar. In another, it's foxes. In a third, boars take the lead. Some researchers see totems, each ring the hall of a different clan. The snake people, the fox people, the hilltop of Federation in stone. Others read protective spirits or chapters of one lost mythology. Whatever it is, it's organized. It has rules. It's a code whose dictionary died with its writers. Then there's the darker layer. Among the thousands of bones at the site, archaeologists identified fragments of human skulls, with deep grooves deliberately carved into the bone. And in one case, a drilled hole, positioned as if the skull was meant to hang from a cord. A skull cult honored dead or defeated enemies displayed at the temple. The pillars had an audience, and some of that audience was no longer alive. Now the question that makes Gobekli Tepe genuinely revolutionary: what was it for? Here's where one of the most charming theories in archaeology walks in. Scattered around the enclosures, excavators found enormous limestone vessels, troughs and barrels cut from single stones, some holding around 160 liters. Chemical analysis on residues has pointed toward oxalate, a compound that forms when cereals are soaked and fermented. In plain language, these may be brewing vats, beer, at the dawn of everything. And suddenly, a picture snaps into focus. Hundreds of workers hauling 50-ton stones don't show up for nothing. But a festival. Imagine it. Bands converging from across the region. The bones show massive feasting on wild cattle and gazelle. Meat roasting, stories and marriages exchanged, and great vats of fermented grain passing among people who spent most of the year in small, scattered groups. The temple wasn't just a place of worship. It was the party that built the world, which leads to the boldest idea of all. To brew and to feast at that scale, you need a lot of wild grain, reliably, every gathering. Some scientists argue that this demand is exactly what pushed people to start managing wild wheat, and eventually to plant it. And here's the detail that gives me chills. Geneticists tracing domesticated einkorn wheat, one of humanity's founding crops, find its closest wild relatives growing on the slopes of Karajada, a volcano you can practically see from Göbekli Tepe. The birthplace of farming and the first temple share a postcode, so the sequence may really be God's first, feasts second, farms third. Civilization, in other words, may have started as catering, but temples, like civilizations, have lifespans. And Göbekli Tepe's decline is written in its own layers, and it's quietly heartbreaking. The oldest enclosures, the deepest, are the greatest. The vastest rings, the tallest pillars, the boldest carving. The peak comes first, then, century by century, climb the layers and watch the energy drain. The structures shrink into modest rectangular rooms. The pillars become stubby echoes of their ancestors. And some aren't even new. Old monoliths, pried out of earlier enclosures and recycled, second-hand giants in cramped new homes. The world's first monumental tradition didn't end with a bang. It ended with a diminuendo. Maybe the master builder's knowledge thinned, generation by generation. Maybe farming's slow gravity pulled devotion elsewhere. New gods for fields and rain. Maybe the ecstatic mountain festivals simply cooled into neighborhood ritual. And then came the strangest act of all, the ending. The enclosures didn't collapse and weren't abandoned to the wind. They were filled, packed deliberately. Most researchers have argued, with rubble, flint, and bone. The great pillars entombed standing. A funeral for a temple. Some archaeologists now add nuance. Part of the fill may have slumped in naturally from the slopes over time. But the effect is the same either way, and it's the reason you're seeing any of this today. Burial is preservation. The builders, or time acting as their undertaker, sealed a 12,000-year-old time capsule and handed it intact to us. Of course, no site this old escapes without a controversy. Meet Pillar 43, the Vulture Stone. It's one of the most richly carved pillars on the hill. A great vulture with spread wings, a scorpion, wading birds, snakes, and near the vulture's wing, a solitary disc. Below, a headless human figure. In 2017, engineers proposed a spectacular reading: that the animals are constellations, a star map, and that the disk records the position of the sun on a specific, catastrophic date around 10,900 BC, the moment, they argued, of a comet impact that triggered the Younger Dryas, the sudden cold snap that reshaped the planet. In this reading, Göbekli Tepe is a memorial to a cosmic disaster carved by the survivors' descendants. It's a breathtaking idea, and most archaeologists don't buy it. The excavation team itself pushed back. The animal symbols repeat across the site in ways that don't fit a one-off star map. The dating is looser than the theory needs, and headless figures, as we've seen, belong to the site's own skull-obsessed symbolism. The comet hypothesis for the Younger Dryas is itself heavily debated among scientists. So where does that leave Pillar 43? Exactly where Göbekli Tepe loves to leave us, with a carving that is clearly deliberate, clearly meaningful, and still, honestly, unread. Between star map of doomsday and mythology we've lost, the stone keeps its silence. And now the fact I promised you at the start. Ground-penetrating radar has swept this hill without moving a spade. Beneath the untouched slopes, the instruments trace the ghosts of many more enclosures. More rings, more T-shaped giants, more carved messages, sitting in the dark exactly where they were sealed. By common estimates, only around 5 to 10% of Göbekli Tepe has ever been excavated. And Göbekli Tepe is not alone. It's one of a dozen related hills. The Taş Tepeler, the Stone Hills, scattered across this corner of Turkey. Karahan Tepe, with its bedrock pillar forest and its haunting statues. Sai Borch, with what may be the oldest narrative scene ever carved. Sites barely touched, and sites, surely, not yet found. We are reading the first paragraph of a book whose chapters are still closed. And every digging season, someone turns one more page. 12,000 years ago, people with no farms, no wheels, and no writing decided that gathering together, to build, to feast, to remember their dead, to touch something bigger, was worth moving mountains for. Maybe that decision is where everything we call civilization actually begins. If this story grabbed you, the full Göbekli Tepe series, 12 short episodes, one mystery at a time, is in the playlist on screen now. Subscribe, because the ground of Anatolia is still keeping its secrets, and we're going to keep digging them up.